obligation to meet our customer demand for the product. So we wanted to maintain a reliable source of raw materials for our customers. And it was ironic because my father-in-law worked for Wonder Bread, and he was a route person for 35 years. And we sold high fructose corn syrup to the bakery in Waterloo, Iowa that supplied the whole region with Wonder Bread at the time. That was, I grew up with Wonder Bread. I mean, and so that was, I didn't complain about it, but I knew that if you didn't maintain production, then the raw materials that we were providing for these customers of ours wouldn't be able to fulfill their production lines to do what they had to do. So I just tried to look at the bigger picture, and that's what I told Mike Hronovich. I said, Mike, I'm not here to say who's right and who's wrong in this. I'm just saying that if we don't maintain our production, then none of us are going to have a job.
Yeah. And talking about Mike Hronovich, I was just curious, did he happen to ever have a response for you in terms of what your thoughts were?
Well, he let me through that day,
yeah.
So I think he understood.
Yeah.
And we went to school together. So I mean, it's not like I grew up with him. We grew up on Comanche Avenue. We hung out as kids. So I mean, it's not me against him or the fact that I'm trying to break the union. That's the farthest thing from my mind. I just said, Mike, I'm just here. I'm no better than you. You're no better than me. And so I mean, I just appealed to a sense of we got to work together. I'm sorry it happened, but if I don't go, then I don't have a job, and if I don't have a job, then my family. So it's.
You also talked about how your job kind of shifted during the strike, and you were working on the production line as well. Did that happen to a lot of people that were working at Clinton Corn during the strike?
Pretty much so. We just all went out. I think at the time we were maybe 110,000 bushel a day that we were using, and we maintained that. Like I say, in my example, I was doing what 3 people did, but it wasn't that strenuous or anything. You just did it, and I think the other people that went out that had other jobs, whether they were chemists or biologists or whether they worked in the mail room or wherever, you just all had to go out because we were 24/7, 365 operation, still are.
What about the Angela Davis visit? Do you have any memories, or do you?
I just know there was a pastor in in Comanche, and she took. He brought her in, and then I don't think this pastorate lasted much after that because again, you had the division of this family working there in the union. This family had this member there, and so it was sort of a shock, I think, to the entire community that she was given asylum in a church in Comanche, Iowa. So again, when you're working 12-hour shifts 7 days a week, you go home and you grab a bite to eat and you go to sleep and you get up and you go back again. So I mean, I kept going only because of my belief that we had to keep the place operating, we had to keep the place going and be able to have a steady stream of product being produced.
You also talked earlier about how kind of your church changed and people
Sure.
moved around. Was that?
It was tough. At the time I was teaching Sunday school. I was treasurer of the church. I was involved in some other things, and I know I had some in-depth discussions with one of our pastors, and he was saying I can't take sides. but I have to minister to those that have lost their jobs, have to minister to people like you that are working more than you really want to work. And so from that standpoint, our church, you know, and a lot of members that were local Six people, they stopped coming to church. They didn't have any money for offerings, and they didn't felt that you know, they weren't supporting the church in that regard. So that was difficult, and I never really talked about it at church. I just did my job. That's what it boils down to. So,
Can you give me the name of the church?
Zion Lutheran.
Kind of keeping on the topic of the effects on the community and everything. You might have touched on this, so I apologize if you did, if you happen to. But were there any other noticeable kind of divisions in the community that you would want to elaborate on more, that especially that affected you, or?
I just felt that I know people were hurting that didn't have their jobs. We all have a tendency to live paycheck to paycheck, so that really is tough. They got a little bit of money because of the union fund, but I mean nothing to compare with what they had. So I felt sorry for them, just because I knew that was their chosen career. I know that they were productive workers. I know that they worked hard, but you know, let raw emotion overcome sensibility. That I think is really the impact that I remember most.
Definitely. Going back to the events during the strike, these were just some things that we want to hit on, and I understand that, you know, for you it was just going to work, you know, making a living, coming back. But I was also wondering if you had any memories or any comments, if you remember anything about the decertification vote on June 13th of 1980.
Again, I know it took place, but
Yeah.
I wasn't actively involved in all of that.
Yeah.
But you know, that was the direct result of a line was drawn in the sand.
Yeah.
You chose not to approve the contract. You chose to do this. This is the result of your action. So ultimately the responsibility, and I mean that was really tough, because you know, in the end you had people that wanted to come back to work, but they didn't want to cross the picket line, and so that part of it was really difficult, because at what point do you say that I got mouths to feed, and I you know, you stick with your brotherhood, but at the point when it becomes a point at which you can't support your family because you don't have a job, then that really sheds a whole new light on the responsibilities you have to take and the actions that you have to.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what it was like to cross that picket line every day?
After one of the first few days and the encounter with Mike and the other guys, they just sort of, you know, I didn't get hassled after that. So I mean that was, and I just didn't want to drive over the overpass and down into the parking lot and put up with all that. I just did my thing, and I was just one of the people who, and most of us, you know, we didn't complain. We just went out and did our job, and so that's, to me, the most important aspect of it.
Talking a little bit outside of the strike, do you have any thoughts or comments on how the media handled the coverage of it, such as, like, you know, local paper, the Clinton Herald, anything like that?
Well, you know, I would go to my folks' house. We were working 7 to 7, and I would go in and have a cup of coffee with them, and we'd always listen to KROS. So what's the latest? What happened last night? You know, this is, so, you know, we were all hopeful. Like I say, my dad worked at the Chicago Northwestern Railroad, and he was a member of the union. So I just felt that there was a glimmer of hope that they would settle it and come back, and that never materialized. And so my dad would always say that at the end, when the decertification vote took place, you know, he says they cut their own throat, for lack of a better term, and so management decided that this is what we're going to do. We're not going to put up with any more of this. You know, you say that you're going to approve it, you don't. So I think that was the sore spot, that people thought that management would bend, and in this time they did, because all the other times it was, we want labor peace, we want to keep production going, so we'll bend over backwards a little bit to give them what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And
so just a few more questions about some specifically organizations. Do you remember anything about the Clinton Labor Temple in the area?
I knew where the Labor Temple was
Yeah.
at. So, I mean, again, not having, I mean, in my whole life, I've just always tried to, I do a lot of volunteering. I do a lot of extras for the jobs I've had. So that sort of takes up the time. And then when you raise a family, that has another aspect. And so those were probably the most important things to me. But since I wasn't a union member and I knew where it was at, that was about.
And again, just out of curiosity, what kind of specific volunteering did you do?
Oh, I've been involved in church activities, everything from treasurer to Sunday school superintendent to Sunday school teacher, social ministry committee, those kind of things, and I'm on the cemetery board, and I, like I said, I did officiating during basketball and baseball seasons and girls softball, so stayed busy that way.
Mm-hmm. Just a couple more about the organizations. Do you remember anything about the Concerned Citizens of Clinton?
Again, I was familiar with it from the local media,
Mm-hmm.
but I did not take sides. So, you know, somebody asked me, you know, we got to get, I mean, that's the same thing that had happened at church. You know, I'm not here to take sides. I'm not here to have judgment. I'm just here to do my job and practice my faith, and they have the right to do what they did, but I have the right to do, you know, one of the things that I draw an analogy to this, because I came back, I was in, like I said, in the Marine Corps for 4 years, and I came back and went to University of Iowa, and I did what Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And I had an uncle who also was in during the Korean War. But the point I'm trying to make is the year that I came back after getting out of the Marine Corps in 1971, is in the spring of 1972, they closed the university early. So I went in the Marine Corps so that people could demonstrate, but then what was going on made it difficult to continue for me to get my education. So where do you draw the line? What's right, what's wrong? You have every right to demonstrate, but I also came back to get an education. So I still have a conflict with that, but that's the same way I felt, you know, when people were demonstrating and that kind of thing is, okay, that's the way it is. I respect your right to do that, but I'm not getting involved.
Mm-hmm. So you touched on a couple of these, but in general, in the broad idea, especially for people looking back, what would you say is the big lesson to take from all of this?
Well, I could draw an analogy to what's happening with John Deere right now. They laid off another 220 people. They have good times, they have bad times, and they adjust their workforce to meet the demand for the products that they're producing. And so the same thing happens in business, that, for example, I never thought that the big three automakers You know, I grew up with GMC and Chrysler and Ford, and I never thought the airlines like United would go belly up. You know, I mean, it's just the things that I grew up with as being the norm are no longer the norm. And so one of the lessons that you have to recognize is that whether it's in the 70s or whether it's 2015, if you aren't able to understand what the markets are doing and where you fit in all of this, then you don't really understand. You know, we've had business come and go in Clinton. I mean, I had an uncle who worked at DuPont. They were the largest cellophane manufacturer in the world, and they had 700-800 employees. Now there's like 125 that work there. So I mean, it's just the packaging material changed, and when people used to smoke back then, the cigarettes were wrapped in cellophane, and they didn't do that anymore. So I mean, it's that kind of thing. So, but the lesson as it relates to Clinton Corn is that if you don't work together, if your word is not your bond, if you can't understand that management will take aggressive action if you don't have common sense to what you really need to do and where you fit at in this equation, and how fortunate it is that you have a good job, a well-paying job, a job that is secure, and a job that has benefits for yourself and your family. So you can't become so focused on not approving this and in the short term saying that they'll bend to us, and that didn't happen. And so if people can't recognize that the unions aren't as strong today as they were back then, and so I guess that's the a lot of employers, and I think Clinton Corn was a good employer, but they have come to the realization that you don't really need a union in order to be successful. I mean, like, pay is like 3 or 4 down on the list. I mean, it's respect first. Are you providing me a job that gives me a challenge? Are you a responsible employer? And maybe pay is 4. I don't know. But to me, if you can't have the realization that we have to work together and understand each other's positions, and I mean, it's no different than the UAW negotiating now with everything that they had to give up, and they were about ready to go belly up. And so then they also realize that the worldwide competition for automobiles, the big 3 are no longer the big 3. So that is where you just have to adjust, but you have to realize that if you don't do those things, you're gonna come out second best.
Jamie, did you have any more questions?
Are there anything else that you want to tell us? Are there any other stories that you think need to be told?
I really can't. Like I say, I was in the trenches, and I didn't demonstrate pro or con. I just had to do my job, because I had to go back in and do my job, because they still wanted financial information. So you just, somebody come in and help you, and you'd go back in the office and work on some things. So it was just a matter of ensuring that there was going to be a Clinton Corn tomorrow. So that's where I stood.
Hey, Jurgen, I had a question. Can you talk a little bit about what you perceive to be the lasting impact, if any, of the strike and kind of the events surrounding it for the community?
I since I've retired, I volunteer in the schools, and one of the things that I do, I'm working with an autistic young person right now in honors math, And one of the things that really sticks out to me is